How's it going, everyone? My name is Thomas Skrull, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can choose your very first film camera. So the main reason I'm making this video is over the course of the past few years, as I've been shooting film, more and more people have come up to me and asked how to get into film, what some of the first cameras they should look for, or just some general tips and tricks. So I figured that I would create a series of videos that instead of having to explain everything to everyone or kind of having them to try and remember everything all at once, I can just point them in the direction of a series of videos and they can actually use that just to reference it. So with all that said, this will be the first video in the series, and this one will just focus on actually selecting your very first camera. And just a disclaimer, a lot of this is going to be very opinion based just because there are many ways that you can do this. There's so many different opinions on how to start shooting film. So take everything with a grain of salt. There are plenty of guides online, and this is just going to be my personal approach. And because of that, I am actually going to be cutting out some of the formats of film. So there's going to be no instant film in this, no 120 medium format film, or any of the larger formats. I do think that 35mm is probably the best place to start for a beginner, just because you're getting more on a roll, which means that you're going to have more opportunity to practice and experiment, and you're just getting more images, so it's a little less discouraging right when you start off. On top of that, I do think that 35mm is a little more accessible, not only in terms of the cost behind it, but also in terms of where you can find it. It's generally still found in some convenience stores in like Shoppers Drug Mart, instead of having to actually go to a dedicated camera store or order it online. And then on the other end, if you are going to a lab to have your photos developed and scanned, it's also going to be a lot more cost effective to be shooting something like 35mm opposed to something like 120, for example. So before I started recording this video, I talked to some of my friends over on Twitter and on Slack just about what some of the questions they ask people when they're first looking for their first film camera. And this is where my friend Cody had a really good point. So for me, when someone asks me what camera should I get, my first question is, do you want something like a point and shoot, or do you want something like a SLR where you have more of a manual experience with it? And the point that Cody brought up is, why do you want to shoot film in the first place? And that is something that he also said will kind of reveal itself as you go through the experience of shooting film and kind of learning through that process. And I think that's what will really split the groups of people that will actually continue to shoot film or people that will drop it soon after picking it up. It's all about those motives that really get you to be inspired to shoot film in the first place. So that said, what is the main reason you are shooting film? Is it a certain look you're going for? Are you constantly looking at other film photographers' work and you're just kind of inspired by the images they're making? Is there a certain camera that you're just interested in using just because of the history, the cult following, whatever it may be? It's just important to kind of explore those reasons of why you want to start shooting film, just so you can kind of keep that in mind as you go through the rest of the process of not only choosing what camera, but maybe also what film, and maybe even what kind of work you're going to be shooting when you do pick up that film camera. So following Cody's question of why do you want to get into photography, especially with all the digital options that are out there, my first question is usually, do you want something that's more automatic, like a point and shoot, or do you want something that's a bit more manual that provides you a lot more room to grow in something like a SLR, for example? I know there are things like rangefinders, but when you're just starting out, I would highly recommend going for something like an SLR, just because I think being able to see the focus change and have a better idea of how depth of field works will play a big advantage into you growing as a photographer. So out of these two camps, there's a lot of pros and cons, so I'm just going to go into a bit of each just so you can best decide on what fits your needs. So starting with a point and shoot, the biggest advantage is definitely the size. Here I have a Olympus XA2. You can see it's very small, very compact. It's super simple to use, really easy clamshell opening. It has a really good lens on it, and they can be picked up for pretty cheap. So one of the biggest advantages of that is because it's so small, you're actually going to be able to use it in a lot more situations just because of the fact that you're bringing it to more places. On top of that, the simplicity of the controls makes it a lot more encouraging to use, just because you're not going to be worried about pulling it out and missing a moment, because for the most part they're going to be using automatic exposures and choosing the settings for you, so all you have to really do is point and shoot, as the name would explain. And that leads to the last con, and that is that there's not much of a learning curve with point and shoot cameras. Once you figure out how the camera works, you throw in a roll of film and you're good to go after that. So if the need for your film camera is just that you want something that's super small so you can be shooting something discreetly, or you just want something that's with you absolutely every day so you can just document everyday life, a point and shoot is going to be great. But on the other side, if you just want a film camera just for the sake of shooting film, just for the fun of it, and you don't want to have to worry about how to expose certain film stocks or any of the technical sides of photography, a point and shoot is definitely the right route for you as well. But it's not all perfect with point and shoots, and there definitely are some cons to consider. The main one is sometimes the cost on certain ones, because point and shoots are so tiny and delicate, and a lot of the times they are pretty old. The prices on these have skyrocketed. These are definitely cameras that once they stop working, you're basically out of luck and you have to just either buy a new one, because there's not too many places that are doing repairs on them anymore. Another disadvantage is once you buy it, you're stuck with that lens. You can't take off the lenses like you can on something like an SLR camera. So if you aren't looking to expand into different lenses, or you only want the one lens on it, that's great. But for some people who want the flexibility of having more than one lens, you're unfortunately not going to be able to get that with a point and shoot camera. Another con is batteries. Most film cameras have a battery in it for either advancing the film. So on the XA2, it has a little scroll wheel, so you can actually change to the next frame. But on some film cameras, there is no wheel and the battery actually moves the film along. And then these point and shoot cameras will also use batteries for things like metering, so you're actually going to have a properly exposed image, and a lot of the auto settings as well. The reason that's such a con is once your battery dies, you can't use the camera until that's replaced, which is something on like a fully mechanical SLR or something like the Hasselblad over here. It doesn't take any batteries at all, so I can use it whenever I want and I don't have to worry about charging or replacing any batteries. Depending on what you're looking to do with film photography, point and shoots don't offer a lot of room for growth. Because they do, for the most part, use so many automatic settings, there's not too much you can learn or kind of advance your film photography with, just because of those restrictions. So if you are looking to expand your knowledge and kind of grow with film photography and be a bit more experimental, I would probably stay away from a point and shoot camera. In my opinion, the biggest pro for an SLR camera is the room for growth that it allows. Because you can do things like change lenses, manually focus, and really tweak the settings to your liking, there's a huge opportunity for you to grow and learn as a photographer. So if your reason for picking up film is because you want to learn and grow and be a lot more experimental, I would definitely choose something like an SLR, more particularly a fully mechanical SLR camera for your shooting needs. Another big example, which I kind of already led on, is lens selection. Because SLR cameras, you can actually take the front lens off. This allows you to experiment with different focal lengths, and that is just how wide or how narrow the field of vision is with that lens. If you're just starting out, I would probably recommend something like a 50mm, because most of the time the cameras come with a 50mm on it, or a 28mm lens, which is going to be wider than the 50, but for most people who are coming straight from a smartphone, it's going to be the same focal length as your iPhone, for example, so it's going to be something that you're already familiar with. Another big advantage of SLR cameras is that they don't need a battery to be functional. The only time I would recommend getting an SLR camera that does take a battery is if it's used for the internal light meter, but other than that, I would completely avoid any other SLR camera that requires a battery to be used at all. Not because batteries can't be replaced, I just think there's a lot more room for some issues to arise on a camera that does take a battery, and then once it messes up, it's completely done. Whereas a mechanical camera, let's say the internal battery does die, you still have a fully functional camera. Another more obvious pro to an SLR is the optical viewfinder that you can actually look through. So point and shoots do have something most of the time for you to see through, but they don't offer a very engaging experience. An SLR camera, you can really see the focus change from subject to subject, and it's a much more immersive experience overall. And just like the point and shoots, there are some cons. The first obvious one would be the size in comparison to a point and shoot camera. Unless you really put in a lot of effort, the chances of you bringing a SLR camera everywhere is going to be a little more difficult, but it's definitely possible. And then the other one, although it can be seen as a pro as well, is that there is a learning curve to shooting film. And I believe that with an SLR camera, it'll be a little slower starting out before you really get the results that you want. So with all that said about SLR cameras, I would definitely recommend them for people who are really looking to grow, learn, and expand their knowledge on not only film photography, but photography in general. Someone that is also looking to own potentially more than one lens, or there's a very specific lens that they want to use that is only accessible through an SLR camera. And in my opinion, it's also a better choice if you are looking to get into something like portraiture, because you can actually use the viewfinder and see exactly what you're focusing on, where with a point and shoot, although it does autofocus, you're kind of guessing to see exactly where it's going to land. But there are a ton of good options regardless of if you choose to go with something like a point and shoot or an SLR camera. It really comes down to your needs and what you want to do now and what you want to do down the road with film photography. And like many other people who've gotten into film photography in the past, don't think about it too much because this will not be your last film camera. I can almost guarantee that. So I think the most important thing right off the bat is just pick something that you like, that you think fits your style of what you want to do with film photography. Pick it up, throw a roll of film in there, and just get shooting. And at the end of the day, when you do start looking for a film camera, don't be discouraged by any of the prices you see, especially for the higher end models. At the end of the day, all it is a box to hold your film out of the light and to attach a lens onto so you can take pictures. I did go to Twitter and ask other photographers as well, just so they can kind of contribute to the list. So it may be forever growing as this video lives on YouTube, but in the description below, I did provide some examples of cameras I would recommend, and I just kind of split them between point shoots and manual SLRs. So feel free to look through those and see what appeals to you based on your needs of why you want to shoot and what your main goals are with film photography. And then after that, the only thing you have to do is actually purchase the camera. So although this can be difficult because there are not too many film cameras that are sold brand new in a shop anymore, most local camera shops do have a used section, but their prices can be kind of skewed to the higher end. So I do have some recommendations for all of you who are looking for your very first film camera and you want to buy off someone more reputable. So the first option is actually buying in person. For the most part, there are some Facebook groups where people actually buy and sell film gear, or something like Kijiji or Craigslist if you're in the States. These are great because you actually get to see the product before you purchase it, so you'll actually get the opportunity to hold it in hand, see how it feels, and just kind of look for any defects or anything that kind of raises a flag before you hand over the money. Another option for you Twitter users is actually exploring the Believe in Film hashtag. It's one that I've used ever since I started. It was a hashtag that really helped me start not only with connecting and networking with other photographers, but it has helped me numerous times in the past where I just wanted to have a question answered. So if you do have a question that you want to ask about a specific camera or something about film photography, just throw that at the end of the tweet and I'm sure that there will be tons of people there to help you out. It's a very robust community and it's a great place to start. Probably my biggest recommendation after knowing someone personally who's selling a film camera is using KEH. It's KEH.com. It's basically a used camera store. They have a huge inventory of film cameras where you can actually search just the body or you can search certain lenses, and their prices are really decent, and also they have ratings of what condition the product is in, so you know what you're going to be buying. And another thing with KEH is don't be thrown off by the bargain rating. I have only purchased things off that store with the bargain rating and it always comes in basically perfect condition, so don't be too discouraged if the camera that you want is only available there in the bargain condition. And they also have a really good return policy as well, so it's a really good place to go if you want to have a huge selection and have a really reliable seller and also have something like a return policy just to back you up. And I'm not affiliated with KEH at all. I just think it's a really good service and I've used it before in the past and I've had really good results along with a lot of other photographers that I know of. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe for any future content that comes out. And please keep in mind that this is just my opinion. I know there are a ton of different options on how to start getting into film, but if you guys do have any suggestions or recommendations on how people should be choosing their first film camera, be sure to leave a comment below so they can all see that. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.